the fifth nuclear test to a ground test of a new rocket engine to launch satellites. North Korea has continued its pursuit of nuclear weapons and missile capabilities despite the damage caused by a disastrous flood. Korea, as well as the global community, have strongly condemned such provocative moves and have promoted stronger measures against the North. However, North Korea has strongly adhered to its position and demonstrated its advanced nuclear weaponry and carrier rockets. On today's Upfront, we discuss the necessary measures that should be taken by Korea as well as the international community to better cope with the continuing nuclear threats from the North.
On September 9th, North Korea conducted the second nuclear test carried out this year. The fifth nuclear test of North Korea has shown a shortened cycle of nuclear tests, and the power has been almost twice as large as the most recent test. It has also shown that North Korea's nuclear technology has come to a stage where it's right before being arranged for combat. And only about 10 days after the fifth nuclear test, North Korea conducted another provocation. It carried out a ground test of a new rocket engine that can be used for a long-range missile. The government has strongly condemned the North's armed provocations and shown its will to build a strong deterrent against North Korea.
이제 북한은 더 이상 핵 포기를 위한 대화의 장에 나오지 않을 것이며 핵과 미사일 등의 도발은 더욱 심화될 것이라고 생각합니다.
Korea has also promoted bilateral cooperation with the U.S. on North Korea sanctions. The U.S. threatened the North by flying the B-1B, one of the top 3 strategic Lancer bombers of the U.S. over the military demarcation line on the Korean peninsula. It was an apparent show of high level of defense capability. International community has taken immediate actions against the threatening North Korea provocations. UN Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss tougher measures to deter North Korea's nuclear threats. UN Security Council's Resolution 2270 was adopted on January after the North's fourth nuclear test, and it contains some of the toughest measures ever taken by the UN. However, it was still not enough to prevent North Korea from advancing another nuclear test. There has been a rising need to establish stronger and more practical global sanctions to cope with the continuing nuclear threats from Pyongyang. China's participation in North Korean sanctions has become one of the significant factors. The U.S. has decided to impose strong economic sanctions on North Korea through a prohibition on financial transactions in order to prevent further nuclear development. As part of an effort to do so, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on China's Hongxiang Group for alleged long-term involvement in illicit nuclear-related trades with North Korea. All eyes are now on the future stance of China, which has taken a passive attitude toward North Korea sanctions. Upfront discusses practical measures that should be taken by Korea, as well as the global society when it comes to dealing with the continuing nuclear threats from the North.
For today's discussion, we're joined by a great panel of guests in the studio. We have Nam Kwang-kyu, professor of Asiatic Research Institute at Korea University, Kim Han-kwon, professor at Korean National Diplomatic Academy, Park Chang-kwoun, senior research fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analyses, and Kim Kwang-jin, research fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Welcome all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Program.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with a question of what might be going on inside of North Korea. I guess this question might be better suited to Dr. Kim, who has a first-hand experience with the North Korean regime. Now, a lot of experts say that these continuing provocative actions and tests might be in large part geared towards internal solidarity for the internal audiences. Now, after the fifth test that they have conducted, What is your take on what might be going on in North Korea?
Actually, this time, North Korea has toned down a little bit about the significance of their nuclear test. Actually, the fourth nuclear test, Kim Jong-un signed the document for that provocation, and it was revealed. And after the test, there was a strong announcement in North Korea. But this time, of course, they had some gatherings, mass gatherings after the test, and also the propaganda is very active, for their so-called successive, nuclear test. But anyhow, a few days before that test, there was a very disastrous flood in North Korea, which hit the northern part of North Korea.
Right.
So I don't know, whether it is because of that, but this time I think, they toned down a little bit about the significance of this test.
I see. So those two events kind of coincided to give us a lot of questions, actually.
Right.
Right. Dr. Park, let's focus on these nuclear tests. I mean, isn't it kind of a significant development where they finally showed their capability to send a nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile? How do you view the significance of the test and how it might develop into?
Actually, North Korea shows that it has achieved and succeeded in developing nuclear weapons. Actually, in the past, when we look back, and so to some extent, I think that international society and the U.S. and South Korea also had underestimated actual capability of North Korea. But North Korea had conducted fifth nuclear test, and the outcomes of the test show that it had improved its actual capabilities. Actually, those Nuclear Weapons Institute mentions that North Korea has developed, tested smaller, lighter, and diversified nuclear warhead. And also mentioned that it has standardized a nuclear warhead to produce for actually mounting the weapon warhead for mounting missiles.
I see.
But maybe there is just some question we can raise on the statement by North Korea. But actual test and missile launch show that it had achieved to some extent that kind of capability. So we should not underestimate that kind of capability.
Does it mean that it is ready to be deployed, for instance?
Actually, in the statement, we should carefully actually look at the North Korea statement, also the history of North Korean nuclear development. North Korea actually have developed nuclear weapons for more than 20 years. And North Korea had also a lot of missiles, Scud missiles and Rodong missiles, and also intermediate range missiles, Muslim missiles, recently succeeded in testing. Also, the submarine launches ballistic missiles. A lot of missiles also succeed in testing, developing nuclear warhead. It means that it can mount nuclear weapons on the missiles, because missiles have and the nuclear warhead also developed. It is not difficult to integrate those two systems. So also we should think about how much Kim Jong-un regime is focusing on concentrating on its efforts on nuclear and missile development. So I think that North Korea already have organized strategic forces and appointed commander of strategic forces.
Right.
It means that it is ready or going to actually create, organize actual nuclear strategic forces with nuclear weapons.
Right. I think it's safe to say that there will be another kind of targets for development. Professor Nam, what's qualitatively different from this nuclear test, the fifth nuclear test, or from the previous ones? And how do you assess the development path that they have been having?
Yes, it was indicated that the fifth nuclear test of North Korea is the biggest scale in 5 times the nuclear test in North Korea. but whether it was the nuclear warhead test which is indicated the near final stage of nuclear development is not certain, I think. Although the North Korea has shown a technological advance on the test of other nuclear capabilities, such as like SLBM, the submarine launched the ballistic missile with the vertical fireable booster missile, and a solid fuel and the high-powered engine for rocket is very progressive technique from the outsider. But the North Korea has a skill of loading the nuclear warhead and atmosphere entry is unquestionable. So the capability of North Korea's nuclear weapon is partially going to near the final stage, but not yet totally reached the perfectly prepared for actual flight, I think.
I see. There's some questions. Professor Kim, now, as we've been discussing, there is a warhead part and there's a missile part.
Right.
And this time around, they showed a new type of high-powered engine for the rocket. Now, how powerful is that in your assessment?
Pyongyang claims that they have conducted a ground test of rocket engine test. More precisely, a new type of high-power engine for a carrier rocket for the geostationary satellite. It's a long name, actually. The KNCA, the Korean Central News Agency, North Korean state-run news agency, said Kim Jong-un visited Sohae Space Center and guided this test. It has very meaningful to the international society because the North has insisted the space development program, it will be scientific and peaceful in nature. But as we know, this, South Korea and the United States and even China regards it as another test related to the ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Test. So it is very natural that the neighboring country and international society has very careful attention to the North Korea's those kind of tests. In my opinion, the Pyongyang attempted to show their advanced technology, and they could use as a strategic or the negotiation card to talk with the United States, or they want to show their strong will to, they will go to their own way to maintaining their nuclear technology and long-range missile technology at the same time.
But, well, we've talked about the North fifth nuclear test and continuing provocations. And now I'd like to touch upon Seoul's policy towards Pyongyang. But before that, let's take a look at the short video footage.
미국이 가중되는 핵 전쟁 위협으로부터 우리의 존엄과 생존권을 보호하고 진정한 평화를 수호하기 위한 국가 핵 무력의 질량적 강화 조치는 계속될 것입니다.
북한의 핵 위협은 턱 밑에 비수와 같아서 긴급하게 해결하지를 않으면 언젠가는 반드시 양국 국민들에게 큰 피해를 주게 될 것입니다. 북한의 광기를 억제할 수 있는 가장 효율적인 수단은 한미 동맹을 토대로 한 연합 방위 태세입니다.
We are in discussions with our partners, including the EU, about tightening the application of sanctions and pressure, including and particularly to deny North Korea access to the international banking infrastructure.
as can be expected, this new development has pitted North and South in a very competitive position, and the relationship between between two Koreas can't be freezing, can't be more distant at this point. Now, this kind of highlights the fact that we need new or beefed up security measures. I guess we should talk about what is the security measures that we need. I guess I can ask this question to Professor Nam.
Yeah. Maybe the North Korea was across the future additional sanctions will be imposed for the North Korea's illegal actions by the treasury provisions in the UN. We can see the possibility of the additional sanctions, like as financial sanctions, as the secondary boycott, measures from the US, and sanctions on North Korea, human rights issue, and more identify the sanctions from individual nations maybe can do. And related to the secondary boycott, we should take note that Chinese company Hongxia has recently been accused by the US because of the aiding North Korea's nuclear program. Mm-hmm. And also, we can expect of sanctions against North Korea, workers in abroad estimated at 50,000 or 70,000. And more than 80% of the wages of foreign workers of North Korean workers is entering the North Korean leadership. So it is needed to stop the dollar, which can be entered the North Korean leadership. It's maybe the international community can be more additional sanctions to the North Korea, I think then.
I see, Dr. Park. The security measures. So some people say that, well, isn't it the high time that we need to be armed with the nuclear weaponry? How do you assess that sentiment?
It's a very sensitive issue at the moment, and actually, because North Korea enhances nuclear capabilities, so many people worry about the new situation on the developing on the peninsula. So there are a lot of discussions whether we can deploy introduce tactical nuclear weapons from the United States, or should we consider nuclear options? Because it's a general, in general, actually questions and discussion. Because there is no question that nuclear threat should be deterred by nuclear options or nuclear capabilities. South Korea relies on U.S. extended deterrence assurance on North Korean threat.
Right.
So nuclear extended deterrence include nuclear umbrella provided by North Korea. Of course, there are many conventional capabilities. But there are two questions actually. Conventional nuclear umbrella, which is tactical nuclear weapons, are located in the U.S. territory, long distance from South Korea. And the bombers actually carrying the nuclear weapons is based in Guam and or U.S. territory. It takes time. So if certain contingency occurs, or North Korea escalate nuclear crisis at a certain time, in a very short time, the people question whether or not the U.S. can provide proper nuclear umbrella at the right time. That's a genuine question. So people think that we should narrow that kind of uncertainty. So people ask about new options and discuss about the new the introduction of tactical nuclear weapons. The other one is a nuclear option. Actually, many countries who faces nuclear threat which have developed its own nuclear capabilities, as we see in the nuclear weapon states. But at the moment, I think that we maintain strong alliance with the United States. U.S. clearly stated that it will provide nuclear umbrella and other possible all measures. Also, South Korea want to maintain very good as a middle power and open society and market system. Would like to keep its prosperity in international rule and international relations. So under the international relations, it's very hard for South Korea to choose actually nuclear option at the moment. But But discussion will be get good. It's a general process. We have to deliver our concerns to other side, and means that we said to the international society should take a strong action to denuclearize North Korea. If North Korea maybe continue to enhance its nuclear capability, and then South Korea will have to think about many things.
Right, right. Now, in terms of diplomacy, the Korean government has been pretty swift in kind of countering these provocations. On September 12th, National Assembly Speaker and the floor leaders of both parties in Korea have visited the U.S. Now, Professor Nam, how would you assess the result of those visits?
After North Korea nuclear test, the chairman of the National Assembly and the former leaders of the both ruling and opposition parties visited the U.S. In the visit. And the alliance in the between South Korea and the United States reaffirmed the strong Korea-U.S. alliance, and finally cooperated the copy with the North Korea's threat. And the United States is reaffirmed their commitment to the South Korea's defense, including nuclear deterrence. And regardless of the U.S. president election results, Korea and the United States keep the alliance with powerful. It's maybe the outcome of the U.S. visit, I think.
Right. The U.S., the alliance is certainly the important piece in the jigsaw puzzle, but another one, maybe not as certain as the U.S. side, is China. Professor Kim, there's another meeting afterwards, the September 22nd. Right. The head delegates of the six-party talks from Korea and China got together and certainly talked about these provocations from the north. Now, what's your assessment that the China may be joining or initiating sanctions against North Korea?
Right. Kim Kwang-jin, the South Korea's head of the delegation to the six-party talk, met his counterpart in China, Uda Wei, on 22nd September. In my opinion, they have reached an agreement that the international community take swift and stronger countermeasures at the UN Security Council level of countermeasure against North Korea's recent nuclear test. But at the same time, we have to understand China's strategic position, especially under the structure of Sino-US strategic competition, not only in the global level, but at the same time in the Northeast Asian region. If we understand China's strategic calculation over the Korean Peninsula, probably the Chinese government will not want to take a tougher sanction against North Korea that can undermine Kim Jong-un regime, or it can entails a huge turbulence in North Korean territory. In that case, from the Chinese perspective, the result of the turbulence or the instability of Kim Jong-un regime will harm China's regional strategic interest. So we have to very carefully watch China's real reaction to the international cooperation on sanction against North Korea, because they promised to cooperate with other neighboring countries. But at the same time, in my opinion, the China's reaction has been laxed, not proactively sanctioned the North. So we have to push China, because China has the key to the effect or efficiency of the sanction against North Korea. But at the same time, we have to make new the leverage that can make the Chinese government to more proactively participated in the section.
The China issue is certainly the key. As you mentioned, it is a key, but at times it seemed like it was a weak link at some point. Right. So maybe we can talk about it more when we talk about actually what you brought up, Hongxiang group, the role and how China deals with it. But just staying on the diplomatic side, on September 22nd, the same day actually, we had a China meeting. The Foreign Minister Yun Bong-se was at the General Assembly of UN. He made a speech, and he mentioned something about the whether it is really a high time to disqualify North Korea from the UN membership. Now, this kind of strong words, do you think it's effective, or how do you see the impact of such suggestions?
Actually, international community tried, very hard on every, occasion of North Korea's provocation and nuclear tests, but it didn't work actually because China was not that much serious about sanctioning on North Korea. And even the trade volume, between the two countries has risen, actually in August. After the fourth nuclear test, China, looked serious about that, but in statistics, the trade volume has shot up.
Right, right.
Probably because of the, decision of our side to deploy the THAAD in our country, So I think we need to reconsider or assess very seriously again about the equations on North Korean issue, and especially in this nuclear issue. Will North Korea, eventually abandon or give up their nuclear program? No, we cannot expect their voluntary, giving up of this program. And also, can we achieve that goal with China or with this, sanctions, economic sanctions? I don't think if China does not participate, in this, does not join us in sanctioning North Korea, and if the trade volume maintains its, size,
right.
I don't think it will affect enough to North Korea to abandon nuclear weapons. So I think we are having the wrong equations about that. So we need to assess it very seriously. So I think the foreign minister, including the foreign minister in the United States, we are considering other actions and new actions about North Korea. So I think because of that, the foreign minister mentioned about this, disqualification of North Korea as a UN member. So and also United States, asked, countries to downsize their relationship with North Korea or give up the diplomatic relations with North Korea.
I see.
So because of that, we are pursuing new ways and new means to realize our goal for the denuclearization of North Korea.
It has been reported that the U.S. They made statements that supports our position, or at least behind us, about the disqualification of North Korea. But predictably, China objected to that. I think that's an ongoing kind of a tit for tat between the two. But let's turn to the flood they had. It's an unfortunate thing, and the North Korea very, I guess unexpectedly, for a lot of people, they showed a lot of footages about the flood in their TV, and it seemed like they are making a great big case out of this. Worst disaster in 60 years, and so on and so forth. But the objective data compared to that, the precipitations and the casualty, seems like it's a continuation of the flood problem, which is chronic to their conditions every year. So the people kind of wonder why North Korea is making such a big deal out of this. Do you have some insights to that, Professor Kim?
Me, okay. Probably it's the allot system of the North Korean government budget, annual budget, because the international community has a kind of image of that. The North Pyongyang leadership has concentrated on their financial the efforts to development of nuclear and the long-range missile program, development program. That means although they have kind of shortages in other dimensions of the national the development program, but they just focusing on the military security dimensions, more precisely nuclear and long-range missile test. In that case, probably some other part of the national system, national structure will be weakened more and more. So it is kind of a sign that the North Korean government should reshuffle their allotment of the annual budget to more probe the common people's livelihood. At the same time, the human security issues within the North Korea.
We've discussed Seoul's stance against Pyongyang's provocative actions, and now it might be a right time to connect to an expert to hear more about it. We had a chance to meet with Gu Hae-woo, founder and president of Korean Institute for Future Strategies, who have done in-depth researches on North Korean regime to hear more about Seoul's policy towards Pyongyang.
Firstly, in case of nuclear armament in South Korea, I think it would be very risky choice in international community because if we adopt nuclear armament, probably international community would make a very serious sanction policy to South Korea, things like that. That's why, in case of nuclear armament, we have to make a very smart strategy how to deal with nuclear weapons in Korean Peninsula, things like that. And then, in case of redeployment of tactical nuclear weapon in South Korea, I think it is just going back to 1992. People declaration of denuclearization in Korean Peninsula. That's why it is unappropriate way to deal with the nuclear issue in South Korea. As you know, in case of Iran deal between United States and Iran, the most important issue was secondary boycott because Iran had very engagement economic connections with the international community. That's why secondary boycott had very strongly influenced to Iranian community, Iranian economic situations. That's why it did a very influential factor to negotiate with Iran. But in case of North Korea case, as you know, North Korea has been the most isolated country in the world. It means that North Korea has very few connections with the international community, only excepting China. That's why in case of secondary boycott in North Korea case, the most important factor is China. If China doesn't agree the secondary boycott, it would not be an effective way to deal with this issue. That's why, considering the secondary boycott, we have to negotiate with China.
In terms of how to solve this problem, a lot of people focus on the fact that Kim Jong-un is driving this nuclear program. But other people might say that, well, that's not even true. The nuclear program has been in place even before Kim Jong-un came on. So hypothetically, even if we can neutralize Kim Jong-un, probably it would not make much difference. Now, Dr. Kim, what's your sentiment on that?
I don't think so, because at the beginning of this nuclear program, the Kim family, Kim dynasty, they studied this, and the logic of not abandoning this program at the cost of a lot of death in North Korea because of this economic disaster, collapse there in North Korea. Right. They are paying a lot of cost, but they don't want to abandon this because of the regime's stability and regime's safety. So in that sense, I think if the Kim family or Kim dynasty is driven out from North Korea, I think they will abandon nuclear program.
I see. So Kim family is the key.
Yes, so we need to think about this equation. The denuclearization of North Korean nuclear weapons equals the regime change of North Korea, or the Kim family collapse in North Korea. I think we need to think about that equation.
Now, on to that, what is the response, or what should be the response of the global community? Let's talk a little bit about that. I think the dynamics have a little bit changed because of the possibility in a couple of years or in the near future that the ballistic missile would have the ICBM capability and reach the mainland of the United States. There's a distinctive possibility of that. Now, what do we do as a global community as the immediacy and the urgency has kind of heightened up? The new sanctions or stronger the enforcement? What would be the global communities, or what should be the global community measures? Let's hear from
Yes, previously I said that
well.
more the additional sanction from the UN is maybe possible, and then many of the nations also they independently take a push the sanction to North Korea, and maybe it is vital sanction visually is the financial sanction. Yes, more, as we say openly, the secondary breaker is made very essential sanction to the next step, we can say, from the U.S. And I would like to say to the humanitarian and the stage, the humanitarian issue in North Korea, also maybe adding the next sanction in UN sanctions, I think that. So the U.S. now very pressed on the humanitarian issue for the North Korean people is maybe those major, very important additional sanction, I think that.
Right.
And that I think also the maybe laborers out of the abroad of North Korean people also prohibited the wages into the North Koreans.
Secondary boycott, you mean? That has not been the part of the sanctions so far, but essentially what it is you're punishing not only the North Korea, but those countries and companies that deal with the North Korea. Probably it has a wider impact. Now, related to that is, I think Professor Nam mentioned, but I'll ask the question to Professor Kim, about the Hongxiang group, which the U.S. government has recently accused them of continuing on the illicit trades to a point where they're supplying the parts of the nuclear weaponry, and that has become a pretty big news. Now, what kind of actions do you think that China would take against them?
China's official position reflected on the mentions of the Public Security Department of Liaoning province, and they said that Hongxiang group and a very important the executive person, probably the Hongxiang group founder Ma Xiaohong, were under investigation of very the serious economic crimes in their trading activities. In my opinion, Chinese government official position is very strong that if there is any violation in their the companies or persons, they will punish it according to the contents of UN resolution the 2270. But on the other hand, we have to understand Chinese government has disagreed, strongly and clearly disagreed with the United Government's intention to use their domestic regulation, administrative order, or the regulations for deterring proliferation activity in the international community. And now they apply it to the Chinese company. So Chinese government officially support for the US decision, but at the same time, they could use this investigation of Hongxiang group as the kind of chance to concentrate on the relatively small company for using the scapegoat, and at the same time warning to the bigger companies and Chinese important banks who has business with the North Korea give a special and strong warning so that they will limit the damage from the U.S. Unilateral sanctions against North Korea, especially the secondary boycott, as Professor Nam mentioned.
But it's not just the Hongxiang group. A lot of people speculate that there are a lot of companies involved, right? So maybe Hongxiang group could be a kind of scapegoat, as you said. But how Chinese government did deal with it would be wouldn't it be a message to other companies whether it is okay if you don't get caught, or whether they could see the strong will of the Chinese government to deal with this issue with the North Korea. But as you mentioned, trade volume going up, it doesn't seem kind of very clear cut as to what the intention of the China is. What's your assessment?
Yes, maybe I know that now China government also investigated the Hongxiang group for some trade with North Korea. So maybe the China's intention is they want not collapse the North Korean regime, but it cannot it also can take part in this sanction more people than. So the China governments maybe take part in the UN sanctions, but maybe some to the North Koreans partially state-to-state independent sanction may be limited in now the Chinese opinion.
What do you think about the connection between, as Professor Kim mentioned, the THAAD issue? That China probably has some, the ill feelings towards the United States and the West, who kind of pushed for the installation of THAAD, which in their mind threatens the security systems that they have. Do you think this is a big hinder block, that is a big issue for China to move decisively against North or join in the sanctions?
Well, maybe maybe the effect to the U.S.-China's decision, but I don't think it's a decisive factor for deciding China to participate in United Nations sanction. Actually, as mentioned, the China sees the sad issues in the game of U.S.-China relations, in the game of U.S.-China strategic competition. So China concerns that the U.S. actually built missile defense architecture in the region, not only South Korea, but in the region. So it will maybe weaken China's military position. So China strongly opposed said deployment on the peninsula. But actually the U.S. sanction, United sanction is quite different, maybe similar but different spectrum. I think that the U.S., China already clearly said that it will participate sanction on imposed by the United Nations. But there is many actually the content which each country can decide.
Right.
So China has its own authority to decide which actions, what kind of actions, sanctions should be imposed on North Korea. In this kind of boundary, South China actually not to try to hard sanctions to put pressure or pain and cost on North Korea. So that's a big problem, actually. The actual dual use items and actual people's need, actually the United Nations sanction is very hard to impose. So, but North China actually use that kind of content in the United Nations.
It circles back to the question of how serious China is about dealing with North Korea. But as you mentioned, each country can initiate and implement their own sanctions, and President Obama has already said that they'll take stronger actions against North Korea. Now, so considering that Obama is on the way out, and we have the possibility of having President Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, what do you think, Professor Kim, would be the outlook for the U.S. stance in dealing with North Korea going forward?
Right. Probably President Obama and the two other presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, may have differences in their viewpoints or the policy trends toward North Korean nuclear threat. But at the same time, the U.S. society and government has shown firm and constant against proliferation environment in international community. So probably the president of U.S. can change in history, but the international universal value of non-proliferation activity and values will continue. And in my understanding, the U.S. government and society will uphold these universal values. And probably the non-proliferation can be a strategy, the important element for strategic calculation of the Chinese government and Russian government. But at the same time, they has a kind of responsibility and accountability in the international community. They could continuously conduct it to meet fulfillment the international community demand. So probably most of the country and most of strong country will continuously support for the non-proliferation activity, and they have, in my understanding, unanimous the sanction against North Korea in the future.
I see. I see that we have to wrap up this discussion, but I want to hear from each expert. What's your advice to the Korean government, or towards the global community, how to deal with this issue, and offer your advice?
Yes, the number of rally to North Korean defectors has noticeably increased recently. It may be the sign of the cracks within the North Korean regimes. So South Korea make more efforts for the change in North Korea should be, and prepare the unification state in the North Korean peninsula and the international society. And lastly, I would like to say changes in North Korea must be coming.
Dr. Kim, what do you think about
actually,
the kind of advices you would give?
Without maintaining the balance of power, the military power, there is no peace. So we should try our best and should consider all options to maintain this, balance of power with North Korea. And also sanctioning and human rights issue, everything, international cooperation should be concentrated and directed to the regime change of North Korea. We need to have new approach and new, strategy towards North Korea. That is, everything should be concentrated and directed to the regime change of North Korea, because without, regime change there, I don't think we can see any, a resolution of this issue.
I see. Hardcore fact. Dr. Park,
I think
your
that
advice.
we have a lot of things to do, and I think that we have to make a best effort to get consensus, international society recognize the severity and danger of North Korean nuclear threat and North Korean nuclear development. Under the consensus, I think that we should encourage them to act to punish North Koreans' illegal behavior and reverse the current situations. And especially we should try our effort to talk with China and China's actions against to reverse North Korean actions. That is key we can act. Also, we can consolidate or strengthen our cooperation with our allies, with the United States and Japan and South Korea and the regional countries. If we act together, that we can have more power, pressure or more influence on North Korea regime. In addition, I think that our leaders should concentrate or have put more focus, put more energy on to unite our people.
I see.
And it's very important. If we are divided, it's very hard to get support from international community.
Right, right. Lastly, Professor Kim, you have the last word.
For me, it is natural things that developed and multilateral and democratic society like South Korea show and various opinions and perspectives to see that issues and North Korean nuclear threat issues. But at the same time, it is time to practice how we get gathering our different and coordinate different opinions and viewpoints so that not to see to the outside it is showing kind of the internal confusion or internal frictions, but we have to show how we taking process to the gathering our own national opinions and the perspectives.
I see. It's an external threat, but we have to look inside to see whether we are one with opinions. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There is a sense that the North Korean situation has been spinning gradually out of control and that a new, more effective measure should be deployed through concerted efforts in the global community, certainly including China. The goal should be that North Korea would realize that at the end of the nuclear rainbow, there is no status as a nuclear power, but the further isolation as a dangerous thug. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.